Perhaps as a lawyer, I can take a role in the war against terrorism by doing what lawyers do best, go after the pocketbooks of the terror organizations.
Citizens are suing the Iranian government.
I know it sounds insane. How do you collect even against the organizations?
Feels like one of those things that the State Department or the government needs to deal with.
We felt that the country has to fight back.
What does the winner get? Money?
Terrorism is not an Israeli problem. It's a global problem.
Nitzana, it's so great to have you here. I just finished reading your book last night, and I want to tell you, it sounds like one of those fascinating spy fiction books that I couldn't put down, except that I kept having to remind myself that everything you wrote about actually happened in real life, from terrorism to cartels to suing cartels and terrorists. And it's unbelievable that you have this such wide breadth of work, and I'm excited for people to hear about some of the things that you've accomplished and what you've learned from, and how those of us living here in America can be just even a little bit inspired by what you've been doing. So let's get right into it. Tell me a little bit about just your background. How did you become the leader of an organization that sues terrorists?
Well, first of all, thank you, Maurice, for having me. It's a pleasure. I always admire you. But I actually started as a private lawyer in the beginning of the second Intifada in Israel, finished law school, the Intifada broke out, and I felt that perhaps as a lawyer, I can take a role in the war against terrorism by doing what lawyers do best, go after the pocketbooks of the terror organizations. It was me and my colleagues that we decided to sue terror organizations. I know it sounds insane, sound unheard of. What do you do with a terror organization? How do you collect even against the organizations? What is it? But we felt that the country has to fight back. We were going through a devastating period, and we knew that somebody set up an example, and they have to show the country that we should not be victims anymore, that we should fight back. So we sued the terror organizations, and after 2 years, we started winning in court, to the extent that we were approached by the Israeli Mossad. There was a secret unit back then which fought terrorism. It was called Harpoon. It was a secret unit until we wrote the book about it. And they said, let's collaborate. They will give us evidence. They will give us some information, and we'll expand our activity and take also the banks, those who really wired money, to the hands of the terror organizations. We couldn't do it as private lawyers anymore. We established Shurat Hadin, Israel Law Center, to lead this fight against terror organizations, a financial war against terrorism. And this is what we do since then.
So the obvious question is, even if you are suing and you win against a terror organization, why would they pay you?
Well, because they have assets. You see, the terror organizations have one leg in the terror world, but one leg in the real world. They have bank accounts. How will they wire money? How will they receive money? Even if they want to raise funds, if they want to do fundraising campaigns, and they do. They do. They need a way to raise these funds, to get through a bank account or a cryptocurrency wallet or any other facilities that we are also using, and it's easy to attack in court. The terror organizations is not working in a vacuum. They have integrated with cartels to do drugs together. They have businesses, criminal businesses, but still businesses. They Hezbollah, for instance, sell used cars, steal cars and use and sell them again. They are in bed with the Mexican cartels and manufacture drugs and sell them in Lebanon. They fake even American dollars and do business with it. So all this stuff first creates the terror organizations a lot of assets that we, the victims or any other citizens, can touch. So even if they don't come to court, you get jurisdiction, you can enforce your judgment. And we did. We enforced a judgment against Iran that does not come to court. And yet, when you're able to prove your case, Iran has bank accounts in the United States, has real estate in the United States. They have a building called 650 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, owned by the Iranian government. The victims put a lien on it, and now it's about to be sold. The process will go to the terror victims. The Iranian Shah, when he sent his son to learn how to become a pilot, he sent him to Lubbock, Texas, where they have a big Air Force base, and bought him a house. After the Islamic Revolution, the house became a property of the Islamic government. We learned about the house. We went to the sheriff in Lubbock, Texas, gave him our judgment, and asked him to force a sale on the house. Sheriff sold the house, gave the proceeds to the terror victims. There are bank accounts in American banks that belong to the Iranian government that now are enforced towards the judgments. And I can tell you, for instance, any deal that the Iranians do in the United States, it is forcible. You can put a lien on this deal. For instance, when Boeing agreed to sell 80 aircraft for $17 billion to Iran, we took our judgment against Iran, went to Chicago, where Boeing has its headquarters, and put a lien on the deal. We came to the court, we said, we have a judgment against Iran. We are entitled to the Iranian money that will go in this deal or to the aircrafts. And this is how you enforce your judgment. So even if they don't come to court, you collect your judgment, and we were able to collect billions of dollars for the victims.
But when you describe basically going after the Iranians for terror activity in the West, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I'd imagine that this is the job of the State Department or the government, but you are actually representing private citizens. Your plaintiff is not the United States of America. It's the citizens themselves. And so basically this means citizens are suing the Iranian government and then going after their assets here in America.
Indeed. It's not the American government. It's American citizens, victims that were killed worldwide that have American citizenship, and they can file lawsuits here in the United States. In the beginning, we started with Israeli victims that were killed, but very quickly terrorism spread all over, and we found ourselves representing American victims living in the United States, in Europe, and elsewhere, because terrorism is not an Israeli problem. It's a global problem. So if we started back then with the second intifada in Israel, it happened in the year of 2000, very quickly we had the 9/11 fear in 2001, a year after. And then many victims from United States who were killed in 9/11 wanted to file lawsuits as well as we did against Iran. The responsible, the one who's in charge for doing the 9/11 was Saudi Arabia, but then it was a problem because the law that enabled American citizens to file lawsuits against Iran was not valid for Saudi Arabia. Every country has sovereign immunity. You cannot file a lawsuit against a sovereign state. You cannot sue England or France. The only reason you're able to sue Iran is because Congress decided that a state-sponsored terrorism does not act like a sovereign state and therefore should not enjoy sovereign immunity. So the strict countries that support terrorism that are designated in the watch list of the State Department for their immunity, you can sue these states. So you can sue Iran, she's on the list. You can sue Syria, you can sue Cuba. You could not sue Saudi Arabia because they had too much oil to be on the list. They are not a designated terror state back then in 2000. So the victims who filed a lawsuit against Saudi Arabia, their lawsuit was dismissed. They went and changed the law in Congress to enable them to sue Saudi Arabia, and now they're able to do it.
So after 9/11, Congress changed the law and allowed American citizens to actually sue Saudi Arabia.
Right. So far, if until now, you could sue only for terror attacks that happened outside of the United States to sue sovereign states. Today, if the attack is going on the United States, on U.S. soil, you can bring a lawsuit against the sovereign state.
And basically force institutions that are working in the United States to seize their financial assets here.
Definitely. As I said before, a terror organization is not working in a vacuum. It has a lot of supporters, a lot. Companies that work with the terror organizations, knowingly or not knowingly. Banks that provide them with financial services, directly or not directly. Charities that just contribute and donate to the terror organizations or to its affiliates elsewhere. The terror organizations today cannot work without money. Money is the oxygen to terrorism, to everything. And the way that the terror organizations provide themselves or support themselves is with the help of many institutions, including the United States. I mentioned before the Hisbah organization that get assisted with companies and cartels from in the Venezuela area, in the Triangle area, in Mexico. This is how Hezbollah makes its money. Hamas is receiving a ton of money from charities all over the world that fund them. ISIS was receiving money from a lot of companies that were working not in the United States necessarily, in Syria, in Iraq. Any terror organization cannot work without money. This is why it's crucial, if we want to destroy the terror organization, to destroy its financial infrastructure. The problem is that it's not for the United States government to do it only.
Why?
Because they are limited in their power, in their strength. When the United States confiscate an asset that belonged to a terror organization, it's limited to the amount of money they found. But when a terror victim wins a judgment against a terror organization, they can put a lien on all its bank accounts, not against one bank account, not against one certain amount of money, but worldwide, everywhere. And you block this way, any way for the terror organization to receive funds. This is the advantage that the victims have over the government. Now, to say the least, that the government has political interests that sometimes, come with a conflict with the interests of the terror victims.
You mentioned Hezbollah, Venezuela. Can you elaborate a little bit more? First of all, is when you're talking about these lawsuits, you talk about lawsuits against countries. So is there a country that you associate Hezbollah with, this terrorist organization? And why would a country on one side of the planet build a proxy in a place like Venezuela on the other side of the planet? How are you tracking and connecting all of that?
Wow, that's a great question. Look, Hezbollah is a designated terror organization, but only in several countries. In the United States, it's designated. Why? Because Hezbollah is killing American citizens. They killed the U.S. Marines in Lebanon. They killed did a terrible terror attack in the embassy in Lebanon, killing American soldiers, American citizens. Hezbollah, throughout the years, have been harming Americans, and this is why America has an interest to designate Hezbollah as a terror organization. When you designate a terror organization, it means that you untie any connections. You will not find any ties to Hezbollah in the United States. But countries who don't have any interest to block Hezbollah, who actually sees Hezbollah as a front against the West or as a tool to go and harm Americans, for instance, will not designate Hezbollah as a terror organization and will let him work freely in their country, in their land. So you take countries like Brazil, like Venezuela, like Colombia, like Mexico, that have no interest to fight Hezbollah, that actually are so much don't care about the West that they will allow terror organizations that are harming the West to act freely on their land. So you find yourself actually realizing that Hezbollah is not a Middle East problem because it goes all over the world, and indeed it harms American citizens. And it gets assisted not from the Middle East countries only, which I'll speak about it in a second, but also from other countries that who would imagine that Hezbollah will have a free pass in countries like African countries, like South American countries? Why should they have the interest? And this is the interest. They make a lot of money from Hezbollah working in their areas. The drug cartels who control these countries, in the end, Hezbollah is basing on criminal activity, so they align together. And here, both sides enjoy these profits, and Hezbollah just utilizes this money to go and carry out its terrorist goals against the West. It's not only against Israel, which Hezbollah is bordering in Lebanon, it's against America and against Europe as well. The one that clearly gives money to Hezbollah is Iran and Syria, two countries that for years developed Hezbollah, trained Hezbollah, gave money to Hezbollah, provided weapons to Hezbollah, two countries that have an interest to use Hezbollah. So now you have a lot of countries that are involved with Hezbollah, that's supporting Hezbollah. And as a victim of Hezbollah, you want to bring a lawsuit. But you can only bring a lawsuit against, as I said before, states that don't have immunity in the United States. And the only countries that don't have immunity in the United States are Iran and Syria, because they are on the watch list of the State Department. Brazil, Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, they are all immune. You cannot bring lawsuits against them, although they are allowing Hezbollah to work freely on their country.
The question I wanted to clarify is really, why would Hezbollah, which it appears in plain sight that their real enemy is Israel, why would Hezbollah invest resources and time in growing in Latin America? And so maybe one answer is because they can actually grow financially and roam financially freely in Latin America, where they can basically do whatever they want. But is that really what they need to do in order to make money? They have to go to Latin America? Can't they get money from the Middle East to destroy Israel? Or are they actually coming after us here as Americans? When you say that they're partnering with cartels, I mean, that's where I start getting really concerned, because I know that the cartels are causing havoc right now on the American borders. And I'm curious about, is all of this connected? Hezbollah, cartels, the weakening of the West, and, even there have been discussions about designating the cartels as terrorist organizations because they get to roam freely. And certainly them combining with Hezbollah makes it even more of a connection that they would be a terrorist organization with, obviously, a clearly dangerous agenda.
Look, as you said, having the ability to thrive financially, you can only do it in countries that don't limit your activity. Europe designates Hezbollah as a terror organization. So Hezbollah cannot work in Europe, cannot work in the United States. It can only work in countries that don't impose any limitations, financial limitations or others. So if Hezbollah wanted to work in the Middle East, it could, but then it's supported by countries in the Middle East. Now he wants to get closer to the West to enjoy the benefits that the West can give him. And this is, as we said before, businesses of drugs, of used cars, of faking money, etc., that in the Middle East are not so handy. But I think that Hezbollah, with the orders of Iran, want to get closer and go closer to the West, because in the end, Iran's enemies is not Israel per se, it's the entire West. Iran's goal is to have a pan-Islamic state, to spread the Shiite ideology. And this is not only in the Middle East, but elsewhere. We heard the leaders of Iran wishing to control the entire world. And they need proxies to do it. They need organizations that are under their control to go and carry their act. And if they cannot enter the United States, they will stay on its borders. If they cannot enter Europe, they will stay on its border. And you'll see that Africa full of Hezbollah enterprises, and South America is full with Hezbollah businesses and representatives.
One of the things I love about your work is that it's really quintessential self-reliance, which is a big thing we're all about here in America and PragerU, is you can't just rely on the government to fix all of your problems, right? And so can you give me examples of how you and, just private citizens have done specific things to stop terrorists from getting that financial oxygen that they've been getting? Like, I know you have the Brussels lawsuit. Let's talk a little bit about that.
The Brussels attack was, as we all remember, in 2016, 3 suicide bombers blew up Brussels airport, killed 32 people and injured 300. There were some American victims in this bombing, and we brought a lawsuit on their behalf in the United States against the country that was helping ISIS, Syria. This case is going on in the United States. We were able to prove how Syria assisted ISIS all over the years, how they gave them support, got a file in court. We're going to get a judgment against the Syrian government. This is one of the cases that we have been filing for ISIS victims. We represent victims from the Istanbul attack, from the Paris attack, all done by ISIS, and to get justice for the victims and to find the one who is responsible for these attacks.
Did you win? And what does the winner get? Money?
The winner will get money if we collect the judgments. Our cases against Iran were collected. We were going after Iranian assets, and we were able to get hundreds of millions of dollars for the victims. Our case against Syria haven't been collected yet. We're trying to locate assets. Not an easy thing to do, but we're working on it. Our case against North Korea, if you believe it or not, North Korea is also involved with killing American citizens, not only in the American concept, but also with the Middle East. In 1972, there was a terror attack in the Lod airport in Israel. Today it's called Ben Gurion Airport. It was done by the Japanese Red Army, a terror organization from Japan that came into Israel in order to hijack an Israeli plane. But then when they realized that they won't be able to hijack El Al plane because El Al had high security regulations, they carried an attack at the airport itself. They took a flight of Air France, got into the airport. When they reached the arrival hall, they opened their bags and they threw hand grenades and shoot towards all the people in the crowd. They killed 28 people. 17 of them were Puerto Rican pilgrims that came to visit Israel. Christians that saved their entire life to come and visit the Holy Land. We found out that the country that supported the Japanese Red Army was North Korea. North Korea trained the terrorists from the Japanese Red Army, gave them money, gave them shelter, and we filed a lawsuit against North Korea, and we won. It was for $378 million. Later on, we saw that North Korea was involved with many other incidents in the Middle East, in Israel. helping Hezbollah to build their underground tunnels, helping Iran to build their bunker, a nuclear bunker, helping Syria to build their nuclear bunker. But even in this war, in the war that's going on in Gaza, we saw that North Korea actually provided RPGs both to Hezbollah and to Hamas. So North Korea has a lot of interest in the Middle East, but also in the United States. In the United States, we have a case on behalf of Reverend Kim, a priest from South Korea that wanted to help people from North Korea to escape. And he was just helping them to escape to China. And one day, the North Korean police got very angry at this priest, crossed the border to China, kidnapped the priest, and put him in a camp in North Korea. And over there, they tortured him and starved him to death. The family approached us. You know, it's approached Surat ad-Din, which is a human rights organization from Israel, and yet, because of the reputation, they approached us. They asked us to file a lawsuit against North Korea. We did, but we lost the case because the court said that we had to prove that the priest died in jail. We didn't provide the body of the priest. We filed an appeal and we said, how can we prove that the priest died in jail? We just can assume that what North Korea is doing to political prisoners in their jail. And we brought experts, human rights experts that testified what North Korea is really doing to these prisoners. And then the Court of Appeal came out with unprecedented decision. They overturned the burden of proof and they said, indeed, we should assume that the priest died in jail. And if North Korea has any evidence to provide and to contradict it, they're very welcome to come to court and to provide them and give us a judgment against North Korea for $332 million.
And so what do? You seize the assets that North Korea has in the West?
Right. That's hard, right? Because North Korea doesn't have assets in the West. So North Korea judgments are pretty hard to collect. We do find sometimes boats that belong to North Korea that are stopped either in the Mexico Gulf or in the Panama Canal. And we hire local lawyers, Mexican lawyers, Panamanian lawyers, to come and enforce the judgment and to confiscate the vessel and any merchandise it has on it.
I mean, it's just crazy. It just feels like one of those things that the State Department or the government needs to deal with. The fact that you're like tracking down the assets owned by North Koreans, you know, you and your organization, as opposed to all of these governments who we've, voted for and tasked with this responsibility. It's really just a sign of the times of how, I guess, really limited the government is. I wish we limited them with their power, but they're really limited, I guess, with their capacity and capability. When I think about lawfare, which is essentially the type of work you're engaged in, I generally have a negative connotation with lawfare. It's fascinating to hear you describe lawfare used in a positive way to bring more visibility and bring more justice and really fight evil. Can you give me some examples of things that us Americans here can relate to right now, work that you are doing here in the U.S. that I guess the government is not doing for us and maybe shouldn't?
Well, first of all, let me touch about the State Department funding UNRWA.
Explain UNRWA, by the way.
Right, exactly.
I happen to know about it, but I'm not sure if most people know.
I come from Israel, right? And we have a war now in Gaza. One of the organizations that were supposed to help the Palestinians in Gaza is called UNRWA. Very briefly, in 1948, when Israel was created, a war went on in Israel called the Independence War. The Jews fought against the Arabs, and the Arab League, who was fighting the Jews, told all the Arab residents in the area that was on the conflict to vacate their houses, to leave their houses, to find shelters in other countries, to let the Arab League finish the war, kill all the Jews, throw the Jews to the sea, and then in the end of the war, they will be able to come back to sit in their homes.
By the way, that is a narrative that most people don't hear, because most people hear that Israelis took over the land with permission from the United Nations and kicked out the local indigenous people. But
no, it was way before Israel. I mean, Israel declared a state in May, and half a year before, the Arab Leagues already started the war against Israel, and just asked everybody to make it easier for them just to vacate their houses. So here you have 600,000 refugees that fled Israel and found shelters in Jordan, Lebanon, the West Bank, what we call Judea and Samaria, Gaza, Syria, all the countries that surround, or the areas that surround Israel. But usually the UN, is the one that takes care of the refugees, help them to get established, help them to open a new page in their life, like they do in Ukraine with the 2 million refugees that fled, like they did in Syria in the civil war that they had there with the 5 million refugees. And there is indeed a special agency for the UN to take care of refugees worldwide. In this case, back then in 1950, the UN decided that it's not going to be a general organization that will take care of the refugees from Israel. They will establish a new organization, it's called UNRA, that will help the Palestinian refugees separately from the rest of the refugees. And what UNRWA did was, I think, betraying its goal, its obligation, because instead of helping the refugees to start a new page in their life, they just kept them as refugees forever. They did not let them integrate with the countries that they went to. They did not let them marry other people from these countries. They just kept them in refugee camps, not allow them to go out of their camps, and just living there for years and years and years, promising them that one day they will be able to come back and sit back in their homes in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, and Akko.
2 follow-up questions on this. So you're saying that in places like Jordan, there are refugee camps still?
Yes.
Managed by
From
UNRWA
1950s.
with people who are, moved out of Gaza. They still are living in these refugee camps?
Yes.
How long has this been that they've been living in there?
75 years.
Nobody talks about this. So it's not just in Gaza that UNRWA operates.
Right, exactly. They operate in Lebanon, they operate in Syria, they operate in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank, and they operate in Jordan, and obviously in Gaza. 5 locations that 600,000 refugees fled to. And these 600,000 obviously gave birth, and they have children and grandchildren. And according to UNRWA's regulations, all these refugees have the status of refugees, meaning also the great-great-great-children of these refugees are still refugees. It's really unheard of, unprecedented, insane to an extent. But UNRWA just kept their status, promising them that one day all these refugees that today are 6 million will have a right to come back to Israel and settle in their cities.
Like, I actually don't know anything about this. So let's say they live in Jordan and these refugee camps. They're not free to leave these refugee camps.
No, they have nowhere to go. They are living in a dismal state.
They don't have Jordanian citizenship.
Right, exactly.
They're in this like in-between zone. So these are the people who are, believe in that right to return and have nowhere to go. as opposed to UNRWA are just helping refugees like us in the U.S. When we give political asylum to someone, you know, they become part of the American
100%.
dream, and they can just integrate into society.
Yeah.
That's what actually helping
That's true.
a refugee means. So they didn't do that. They were like, no, you're going to stay here and you're going to keep having kids and you're going to grow, but you're not going to actually integrate into the society that took you in.
Right, right. Take Germany, for instance. They absorbed 2 million refugees. They all got German citizenship. Take France, take London. All these refugees that fled the Middle East from different wars now became British citizens, French citizens, German citizens.
So when the Middle East is taking Middle Eastern refugees, they're not allowing them to integrate into society. But when the West takes on Middle Eastern refugees, they're integrated into society.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are you suing UNRWA for now?
So UNRWA, so for all these years, in order to keep the refugees as in their status and to give them the hope that one day they will go back to Israel, told them to hate Jews. Sorry, but this is what it is.
They taught them in school.
They taught them in school.
That I know.
Okay. So we always wanted to get rid of UNRWA. UNRWA is not a good organization.
Right. There's all this proof of like the actual materials that show Jew hatred, even anti-America hatred in the curriculum, in the schools. We've seen images and videos of that. And so this is UNRWA, which is funded by the UN?
By the U.S.
By the U.S.
Yes.
Okay, so we here in the U.S. are giving money to UNRWA to teach in schools that Jew hatred is to be rewarded and the hatred of America is part of their curriculum.
Exactly. But that's not the problem. The problem is that UNRWA actually participated in the war against Israel. We found out that 450 employees of UNRWA took part in the massacre. They murdered and kidnapped Israeli citizens. We found out that UNRWA facilities served Hamas to hide missiles and rockets and launchers. We found out that the headquarters of UNRWA in Gaza hid the computer servers of Hamas. We found out that UNRWA, what we knew all the time, but now we had evidence that UNRWA became an instrumentality of Hamas, that UNRWA became a terror organization.
Funded by the United States of America. So the U.S. is funding these terrorists.
Yes. The United States is a bigger funder of UNRWA. They gave $4 billion so far to UNRWA. Just this year, they gave them $432 million. And this has to stop. UNRWA has to be dismantled. UNRWA has to disappear. It's not a problem against Israel. It's a problem for the Palestinians as well. And Israel cannot suffer again and again from UNRWA's involvement with terrorism. The way to dismantle UNRWA is just to stop funding it. So thousands of Israelis joined a lawsuit against the State Department to defund UNRWA. We know that when the IDF revealed the fact that some UNRWA employees participated in the massacre, the U.S. State Department temporarily stopped the funding for UNRWA. It shouldn't be temporarily. It should be permanently. It should be for good. United States has to realize that UNRWA should not be in Gaza anymore, not only in Gaza, anywhere else, if they really want to solve the problem between the Israelis to the Palestinians.
Are there any U.S. citizens that are suing, I guess it's the State Department,
we have 1,500 American citizens, along with 6,500 Israeli citizens. They're all suing the State Department because the American citizens, also the Israelis, but American citizens are really getting hurt by UNRWA.
The State Department probably thinks that you're a pain in the tush, as I would imagine.
Well, They have they're free to think whatever they want. Indeed, we're not good friends. We have a lot of cases where the State Department tried to obstruct our proceedings, but in the end, the State Department is not doesn't have the final word. It's up to the courts. And a lot of times the court just side with us because the court understand what terrorism is. The court understand that a free world cannot afford free terrorism, and they sometimes just reject their opinion of the State Department and rule in favor of us.
Well, it's obviously important that we continue to hold our leadership accountable. Another example where you're doing that is with the colleges, and you're suing Harvard, which is another thing we kind of have in common, where I say defund these Ivy League schools that are really betraying us and our students. So tell me a little bit about your Harvard case. When you sleep, actually. People ask me that question. It's like, all these lawsuits, when you sleep.
Yeah.
But okay,
it's around this work us in a way that is just work around
all
the clock.
Consuming.
Really, yeah. Harvard lawsuit was initiated by alumni of Harvard that came and said that Harvard became a joke as a result of this anti-Semitism which is escalating the campuses, and the fact that Harvard allows Israel bashing to go freely. It came in a way that people just make a laugh of the Harvard diploma. You see cartoons making a joke of Harvard graduates. Law firms and other companies and firms told Harvard that have no intention to hire Harvard graduates anymore. The way that Harvard allowed all these shoutings of pro-Hamas students from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, allowing call to genocide on their campuses, saying to Congress that it's okay, but it depends on the context. Really ridiculous things that turned the diploma from Harvard to a joke.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think once upon a time I had some respect for these Ivy Leagues, and now I have almost nothing. I mean, for me, it started with like Title IX and all the social justice warrior stuff and all of that.
So Harvard had an obligation to keep the reputation and the prestige of their graduate's diploma. In the end, the students came, invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in this degree, expecting to have it forever. And by Harvard conduct, this diploma was devaluated. They got harmed, and they filed a lawsuit for damages against Harvard University.
Wow, that would be very interesting. I'm definitely going to follow that lawsuit. And meanwhile, I think all of us should, at the very least, stop supporting these institutions that quite literally hate everything we believe in.
Yes.
Well, it's a fascinating conversation. I know we can go on. I know that you've sued Google, which is another thing we have in common. But Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act is a real issue, and you guys are also fighting to open that discussion, which I think will be very helpful to many of us organizations that have been censored. The Communication Decency Act provided immunity to what I call the kings and queens of the internet, where they get to just decide whatever they want and get away with it. So it will be interesting to follow that lawsuit. What's your status on your lawsuit against Google?
Actually, we represent victims from LA. Naomi Gonzalez, a 24-year-old student that received a scholarship to study a semester abroad. She went to Paris, and she was killed in the terror attack that ISIS carried out against in the death metal angel concert. She was the only American that was killed in the attack. We represent her family in a case against Google because Google owning YouTube allowed the beheading videos of ISIS back then in 2016, 2015. And in the end of this horrific, horrible videos, there was a way to contact ISIS and to join. This is how ISIS recruits all the people that we learned about from Switzerland, from Austria, to join, learn in Turkey, in Syria, in Iraq, learn the method of ISIS and bring them back to Europe to carry out attacks against European and American citizens. That's what happened in the Paris attack. So we brought a lawsuit against Google for aiding and abetting ISIS, and the case was dismissed. Section 230, immunity. We filed an appeal. Still, the case was dismissed. But when we filed an appeal to the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case for the first time. And I've been doing these cases for at least 8 years. For the first time, the Supreme Court agreed to hear a case and not to dismiss it based on Section 230. And it was a fascinating hearing, I must tell you. Usually, a hearing in the Supreme Court takes an hour, 20 minutes to the plaintiff, 20 minutes to defendants, 10 minutes each for rebuttal. This time it took 3 hours. And 9 judges were sitting there hearing the case and not knowing what to do. Because on one hand, they said, we are not the 9 best experts for the internet. We know that Section 230 could not stand anymore. The social media have the algorithm, they have the tools, they are very involved with content. They make billions of dollars from content. They push ads and they do this advertisement based on content. Why should they be immune from content? Why should they have no liability because of content?
Well, and they also know how to censor. I mean, they censored not just the president, but they censored
everybody.
PragerU. I mean, they have a blacklist. I mean, they obviously know how to censor. They
Exactly.
just pick and choose who they want to censor, right?
Exactly. So they use content. They know how to control content. They know how to monitor content. If they wanted to, they could have monitored terrorism and these videos and all that stuff. They cannot be immune. On the other hand, if you strip them from their immunity, if you cancel to Section 230, you open up endless lawsuits against the social media companies, and not only against them, against any company that worked on knowledge, on content, on recommendations. It might affect the entire economy of the United States. It's pretty scary for the Supreme Court to get involved. And therefore, in their decision, when they came down, they said, we are not dismissing the case based on Section 230. They allowed us to continue with the case and prove liability. It was the first time that a terror case against a social media company continues on against a social media company.
So what can we expect to hear about this particular case?
So now we are proving the liability in case. If we can prove that Google helped ISIS in this specific terror attack, we can win the case. We can find Google responsible for the attack, and Google will have to pay billions of dollars compensation to the family.
Fascinating. Well, I'll be following all of your work. You do so many different interesting things. If people want to follow you and learn more about all the different cases that we didn't even have time to cover here, or even if they want to get involved, enlist, where can they find you?
We are on social media. We sue social media, but we are still on social media everywhere: Facebook, Twitter, Google. Just do Shurat Hadin or Israel Law Center, or Google my name. It will show up. It's Anna Leitner. And yes, join us, help us. It's the fight for the victims, the fight for the free world.
Yeah, I couldn't recommend this read more. It's so interesting. It's better than most Netflix shows.
Thank you so much.
Just a plug for your book, Harpoon, which also, if people are struggling with your name, it's all over this with this book, so that can help as well. But God bless you. Nitzana, thanks for everything you do.
Thank you, Marie.
And we wish you just luck.
Thank you very much.